have such sights to show you. We're Poppin the Scary Horror Podcast here. I'm your host, Coale, and with me, as always, I have my good friend and co-host, Aaron. Aaron, how goes it, my friend?
It goes. It
does. It really does.
It never stops.
No, we're not stopping till we hit Japan, am I right?
Yeah, Nippon.
Garugamesh. that was the I guarantee you that is the least enthusiastic Garugamesh you will probably hear on the internet, period. Only here at Poppin the Scary Horror Podcast.
That's a deep cut, yeah. That's an old one.
Yes. Yes, there you go. Thank you for bringing the Riz to that, as the kiddos say. That they probably don't say. I am very out of the times. Yeah, so we're watching Onibaba today, which, as we discussed kind of towards the end of the last episode, we really don't know anything about or anything like that. The only thing I know about is that it's part of the Criterion Collection, you know.
Oh, fancy.
I know, super fancy. You could find it in the Criterion Closet there, and it's from the 60s, and it's Japanese.
Okay.
And so it's a film that's been on the back burner for a while, and I don't know, whenever it comes to my backlog films, it's always hard to get caught up with it there, especially with how many films are coming out more and discovering all the older films and newer films. It's, yeah, now, how do you usually handle the backlog whenever it comes to you trying to catch up to films?
Oh boy, man, somebody mentions a film and I say, I've been meaning to watch that, it's on my list. And then I watch some show I've watched for the 400th time. Instead.
Same.
That's kind of how it goes. But then eventually, sit down and be like, I'm in the mood for a movie. And then, my girlfriend and I will agree on the same movie, and it's like magic. And that's how I finally watched Everything Everywhere All at Once, like 3 years after it came out. Despite every day somebody telling me I should watch it, and you're like, you're right, I probably would like this movie. And it's amazing. That's just the pace I watch movies
Yeah,
at.
I agree. It's better late than never, though. That's a good thing there. I am curious, though, because this film, I believe, came out in 1964, I want to say. Oh. Yep. So it is like exactly 60 years later. So we are 20 times the amount of lateness arriving to this film as we are with Everything Everywhere All at Once. Yeah. But at the very least, I'd be lying if I said I wasn't a little bit hopeful that this film will be good and enjoyable. Yeah. So any precedents going in, or just we're both kind of flying in blind or something like that?
I will say, yeah, you can't be a bad movie and be in the Criterion Collection. But that being said, you gotta have something going for you. I've definitely watched some Criterion Collection films and left that experience being like, what was that?
Oh yeah, me too. I'm looking at you, Mulholland Drive. You know what you did.
But there has to be something going for you. So I'm excited about that. I really don't know anything about this movie, though. I know Oni means demon, and it's a horror movie, so I'm guessing we're in demon territory. I don't know. Let's find out.
Yep, we will find out. So don't go anywhere, because we will return after we watch Onibaba. And we are back from watching Onibaba. Onibaba. Bumblebee Tuna. I don't know why that popped up in my head. I don't know. Jim Carrey's just always permanently taking residence in my skull. Yeah. So, after going in blindly into Onibaba, how do you feel coming out of it?
Yeah. Wow. Definitely interesting. Definitely a very slow burn. Definitely, yeah, not as far as horror movies go, not super scary, but yeah, I didn't know what to expect. It was a really cool foreign Japanese film, black and white, about some people living in some grass huts.
Yeah, that's pretty accurate. Yeah, it's so weird with this film because yes, I was thinking the exact same thing that I was watching it, and that's kind of like the weird thing about horror. There's definitely just a huge spectrum whenever it comes to how horrific something can get. Like, for instance, I know some of the films we reviewed on this podcast, like American Psycho, even though you love it, you wouldn't say it's like a true horror film, or
Right.
probably ones, but there's a lot of horror elements and a lot of horror vibes, and
Yeah.
definitely you understand why it would be considered a horror as well.
Right.
I think this definitely falls in line with that, although, like I said, for the first 80% of the movie, I would argue, is not really a horror film. Definitely has some, like, war stuff going on and everything, which can be horror related.
Some elements of mystery, as in, like, what's going to happen. But yeah, I see what you're saying. Definitely not super horror.
The other thing I was very surprised by is, we're gonna do a fun exercise there.
Okay.
I don't know if you looked at the clock or anything, but how long do you think Onibaba was?
It definitely seemed pretty long, but I get the suspicion that it's not as long as it seemed. If I was judging based purely on vibes, I'd be like, wow, that was like a 2-hour movie. But but just because it was so slow paced, I'm gonna guess it was like 90 minutes.
It was right in the middle of that. It was an hour 45 and everything. For me, it felt very long, but not in like a necessarily bad way, but it's not in a good way either. There's just definitely a lot of stuff where I'm like, they could have trimmed the fat off a little bit of this film. Now, granted, there is a lot of nice stuff to look at this film, and it has a good story and everything, but there was just a lot of stuff that I'm like, thinking about it, I'm like, we could have trimmed up some of the stuff they did.
Yeah, I definitely get that too. It's definitely what I would call a vibes-based movie. You know what I mean? Like, it's very, very slow paced, but the part of that is to get you like engrossed in the world, and whether or not that's ultimately a great thing or not great thing is probably dependent on taste a little bit. But it's definitely slow, but I think that's just to get you entrenched in this very unique world.
Yes, I definitely think that's correct, and we'll probably talk a lot more about it, but initial vibes is kind of like interesting, but definitely isn't perfect.
Yeah.
So we'll go ahead and just dive into the plot of Onibaba. So Onibaba takes place during, I'm probably going to butcher the timeline, but like feudal era Japan,
That's what I was gonna say, just feudal Japan.
Yes, whenever samurais, roam the landscape, and there's this war going on, and this woman and her mother-in-law are trying to survive by basically robbing off of dead bodies they come across there. Because, again, it's wartime. A lot of people are suffering and everything, and they're just basically trying to survive every day. And while they're surviving, the friend of the woman's wife returns to let them know that, hey, everybody's gone, and it's just us three. And so as they try to survive during the war times, tensions start building higher and higher, given certain tensions that start building up from all aspects, whether it be the war or personal conflict, which then ends up devolving into a more horrific state of being and everything. Story-wise, I think it's good. I think it's perfectly fine. I definitely kind of find it interesting. It is also very interesting because looking here at IMDb, I'm not sure if it's different with the credits in Japan. The credits are as follows: Kichi's mother, Kichi's wife, and Hachi. So the women do...
Which is funny, because Kichi does not appear in this film.
Yes. No, he does not. And so the fact that at least IMDb labels them as that makes it very odd. Very... Oh, we gotta respect the men's names, but the women, they don't matter, even though they're literally like I would argue, the majority of the film,
Yeah.
focusing on their relationship. And I do like that. I do like how basically with these characters, at least both women, their one connection is through the mother's son
Mm-hmm.
and this woman's husband, just being one person. That being said, Kichi. So I think it's definitely an interesting dynamic because, it's not like they've known each other their entire life. They've only known each other
Mm-hmm.
through one mutual person. And so they're having to work together to survive. And again, they are not afraid of robbing off of fresh dead bodies and
Yeah,
everything.
yeah.
So definitely was an interesting aspect of it. So I think plot wise, I was hooked and everything. It's just more so how much time. Again, it's a vibes film, as you said. It
Yeah.
really marinates in the vibe and everything. And I'll get to cinematography later because that's definitely going to be a point I will bring up talking about a lot. But whenever it comes to story, I wouldn't say there's too much. There's definitely a lot of
Yeah.
interesting conflicts that pop up, but it's
Mm-hmm.
very straightforward. It's just literally them surviving.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, there's definitely. I mean, I don't want to get too much in spoiler
Mhm.
territory. There's definitely some hostility between the old woman and Hachi, and sort of a conflict that takes place involving the daughter-in-law, and that's sort of where a lot of the plot ends up going. But you're right; it's a fairly muted plot.
For sure, which definitely I think the whole intention of the film was just to really show this kind of survival horror kind of film and everything,
Mm-hmm.
which it came out in 64, so I think it's definitely cool that it was kind of bringing this idea more to light than how it's very very popular now.
Right, right.
So I definitely like that. Talking about the characters and everything, let's go ahead and talk about the older woman and everything. And I first off love the design of her, just like the big poofy hair, the big white streak and everything. And all three of the actors do a very good job
Mm-hmm.
of conveying their emotions there, especially the mother and everything, because she's definitely no nonsense, very, very driven to survive.
Mm-hmm.
And again, she's also just kind of recoiling with the fact that they, spoiler alert, but I guess we have to kind of talk about it. They find out that her son and the younger woman's husband is dead.
Mm-hmm.
And then Hachi was the only one to come back alive from that. So she's having to recoil from that and still continue to try to survive during this very, very bad time. And again, she's obviously not afraid to cross any moral boundaries whenever it comes to survival
Right.
and everything. So I think they do a good job. And again, kind of seeing how their characters spiral as the story continues is very interesting because they do start off at a muted point a little bit there. Like they're just pretty quiet until Hachi uh, arrives and everything. In all honesty, the film's pretty silent. Like the first words of dialogue aren't
Mm-hmm.
spoken until like, I don't know, what felt like 10 or 15 minutes in.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I thought that was a very interesting point, but I feel like all three of the actors were strong, although some of them were very comedic. But again, it's mostly on Hachi's part, I
Yeah,
will
yeah.
say, just over the top and everything. So I'm not sure if it was meant to be comedic or if that's just kind of the way they wanted the frustrations or anything to happen there. But that being the point or whatever, I feel like the mother at least does a good job. How did you feel her performance was and as a character?
Oh, I mean, I think she thought she was great. Yeah, she
Mm-hmm.
was. She's definitely harsh survival mode. Any not trusting anybody she comes across kind of
Mm-hmm.
person, just there to survive with her and her daughter, and very protective of her daughter-in-law. Yeah, I thought it was a lot of fun watching her interaction with Hachi, because I do think Hachi was meant to be a little bit of a goofball,
Hmm.
as much as you can be in like something that's so stark as the times that they live in. But he's like a drunk, and he's not afraid to not afraid to flail around and say what he wants to say or whatever. So their interaction was really funny to me. But
Yeah, yeah, definitely good stuff there. I guess we'll also jump over to the daughter, who, again, it is like you believe these two would survive together with their chemistry that they have initially there, because
mm-hmm.
she's also very muted, but is also just clearly going along with whatever her mother-in-law wants and everything. And as she has to deal with the fact of learning that her husband is dead and everything, she then also has to kind of think about what she wants now
Mm-hmm.
that, like, the love of her life is gone, and they're in this survival mode and everything, that it's like, well, what do I do now and everything. And then whenever she starts kind of thinking her own thoughts there, and Hachi's kind of there almost like a wedge in between to
Mm-hmm.
kind of separate the dynamic and everything, that's whenever she starts also giving her own thoughts and feelings there, and
Yeah.
decides to enact upon it more, which starts to cause conflict with the group mode of survival and everything. So I think it's definitely a very cool aspect there, and it's just kind of interesting just to, again, see what happens, like whenever there's just a small inkling, like step by step by step, until you reach the end of the film there,
Mm-hmm.
where everything has kind of gone way different. But I felt like she also did very good as well. Very good. I would say all three of the actors were very good, especially whenever it came to the camera's close-up shots. Like
Mm-hmm.
the expression they were able to hold on to and everything just really help add to the vibe of
Yeah.
the film, as you would say. So I think she also did very fantastic, and then, again, she does end up being very different in her own way and being a lot more expressive and in tune with just her more inner needs that she is having once again.
Yeah.
Um, with Hachi, yeah, like you mentioned, they're very much a goofball and very much a stark contrast to the two of them
Mm-hmm.
and what they want, which I feel like ends up being great, because there's a lot of points where you're like, I don't know if he's going to be antagonistic towards the two of them. It's
Yeah.
like definitely a point of contention, because he is just sort of a wild card and definitely quick to emotions
Right.
and everything. And literally, whenever he comes back, he's just like, oh yeah, I just got out of there. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I just left. It was bad. Even
Yeah,
had
I
to,
ran. Yeah.
yeah, I had to pretend to be dead.
Mm-hmm.
It's fine. And he just kind of sees it as funny that he survived or whatever, and just is kind of making light out of the survival aspect,
Mm-hmm.
even though it's definitely harsh times. But again, I do think, even though he can be a little unhinged as a character, I think it's good to have a character like that as well, because then you start to believe whenever they both start to build a disdain towards him, in a sense,
Mm-hmm.
on why they don't really care for him and everything. So I think he's definitely also a good addition for this story that they're trying to tell. And while there are other characters in the film, it's just the main three, really.
Yeah.
There's other people we could talk, but again, they're just more so serving a purpose to the plot, as opposed to being kind of like their own characters,
Right.
which is not a problem at all. I think it definitely works out good.
Yeah, no,
Um,
I love the balance between the three of them, because you kind of get that first 10, 15 minutes of the film or whatever where it's, mother-in-law and daughter-in-law kind of surviving. But then whenever Hachi enters the mix, it's like suddenly in certain parts of the film it feels like anybody could be antagonistic towards anybody else. You know what I mean?
mhm.
That triangle really sort of completes itself in the sense of like who's, you know, uh, when you have to do what you have to do to survive, like who's gonna get the end of the katana?
Yes. That's such a good term. Oh my gosh. Yeah, and of course we're trying to keep him muted about all the spoilers and
Mm-hmm.
everything, but Definitely does. I mean, it's cool for a film this old to be visiting aspects that I feel like I've seen other films visit in
Mm-hmm.
later decades and everything. So it's just kind of cool. Like, oh, cool. They were talking about this during this period and everything. One thing I will talk about again is like I did mention it at the beginning of this review and everything, but the pacing, again, I don't mind stewing in the ambiance of it because
Yeah.
with the cinematography, especially, spoiler alert for that, I think it was pretty much fantastic
Oh yeah.
like 90% of the time. Like, rarely was there ever times where I was like, that's a little bit of a messy shot. No, it was
Mm-hmm.
just always on point. So I never minded per se spending a long time, but it was definitely with how long they focus on certain aspects and everything. It's like, okay, I get it.
Yeah.
Can we move to the next part and
It's
everything?
kind of being like in an art museum.
Yes, like you're looking at, it, you're like, this great
Mm-hmm.
piece. We got a whole museum to finish up
Yeah.
here before they close.
Yeah, you're in an art museum with your grandma, and you're like, let's go, let's go a little bit because
Yeah.
I'm part of the Subway Surfers generation. You know, we got to put that below the paintings for me to.
Have Family Guy also shoehorned in and everything.
I I need that because I just am used to being overstimulated all the time. But
Mhm.
yeah, this is definitely a movie of its age where they were like, "Haha, you're trapped in the theater, and this is what you're doing all night. So
Yeah.
soak it in."
Yeah, and so it's like I don't know. I don't know. For me, I mean the art gallery is much better than my analogy because I was going to say it's like eating a bag of potato chips.
Yeah.
Like it's good for a while and but if you keep just eating a bag, you're like,
Right,
I
right.
feel like I need something
So gotta
else.
balance it out somehow. Yeah.
Yeah, doing that there. But no, the art gallery is even better. Because I didn't mind that it took a long while. Like I
Mm-hmm.
wasn't ever bored per se, but I was like, yep, okay.
Yep.
I get it. I'm picking up what you're putting down. And fortunately they would introduce a little new aspects there, but it felt like it did take a while before it got to another point there.
Yeah.
But yeah, like I said, fortunately it was tolerable to wait and
Mm-hmm.
everything because I'm just going to talk about it now. I think the cinematography is wonderful.
Oh.
I think it's fantastic, and I felt like they truly mastered black and white film.
Mm-hmm.
Like, because with the way the lighting was and the framing and everything, it's just a visually very pleasing film in black and
Oh.
white. And in
Yeah.
all honesty, I feel like black and white served it much, much better than if it had been colorized
Especially,
or anything.
yeah, because the whole thing is set in like this grassland this marshy grassland that they are embedded in. And so just seeing the shots of the tall grass in black and white, and like the contrast of the shadows and the water
Mm-hmm.
and everything as they kind of wade through in their little white outfits. I don't know what you call them. I was about to say kimono, but that's not Ryan.
I was about
whatever,
to say the same thing, dude.
whatever it is. It's great to I think it's just visually very appealing for a black and white movie.
It is a very beautiful film, and again, like the way like you mentioned, they're in like this grassy field and everything. Now I will say, and this is obviously just sort of a product of the times, it was definitely jarring to see it feel like it went from day and night from a lot of shots because
True.
the background would be super light, and then go super dark. But again, I understood they did that because they're like, hey, this looks visually better to light it this way and everything. So I got it. So it was never too distracting where I'm like, oh my gosh, just make up your mind whether it's day or night.
All right.
It was just more so like, okay. But yeah, because like them going through the tall grass fields or against them sleeping in their own huts, and whenever they would have close-up shots, they would always aim the light a certain way at their face, really
Mm-hmm.
showing like the contours of their face and everything. And the makeup is gorgeous on both of the women there, especially with
Mm-hmm.
like the eyeliner and everything. It's like very theatrical, which
Right.
is good. They are taking advantage of the medium, which I always love to see. But yeah, this is honestly, I might argue, one of the most beautiful black and white films I've seen.
Yeah.
Like I felt like they just truly understood the medium. They knew how to bring it to the utmost advantage. They knew they knew their palette.
Mm-hmm.
And there's just a lot of shots where I watch it, I'm like, man, this film's so nice to look at.
Mm-hmm.
Which helps. It helps because it does meander in the mood and everything, that you're like, well, at least this is a pretty, cinematography and everything.
Mm-hmm.
And again, some shots, especially if them running through, it's just kind of more shake cam and everything, which I'm always iffy about. I feel like it's definitely hard to master, but that's like nitpicking comparatively to how nice the cinematography is, especially with some of the shots they do later on and everything, which I can't talk about, but there's definitely a reason, because there's a still image of Onibaba that I remember seeing pop up constantly, and it doesn't show up till the end of the film,
Right.
because I was like waiting, I was like, okay, when's this still going to come up? I know it's coming up soon. But once it does, it's very, very, very artistically wonderful and everything. I mean, there's a reason everybody remembers that still or whatever. Music is also surprisingly pretty fitting. It's very abstract, kind of.
Very atmospheric. Yeah.
It just kind of is like it's like the Twilight Zone and the Shining music had a baby almost, like very like
It blends in really well because they do a lot of sound effects where they just have these so many just sweeping shots of like the grass, and it sounds like Foley work to me, where they're like simulating the sound of the grass crinkling and swaying in the wind, and just the eeriness of it. I love however they did that, because I don't think they just I just don't think they put a microphone out in the grasslands. It's I mean, it's mixed to a point where it's just sort of creepy and minimalistic.
Yeah, but I really like it a ton. Now, granted, I can't tell you any of the music, but if I heard it, I'd be like, oh, that's some Onibaba music. That's some Onibaba music going on right there. But yeah, it definitely helped, and I felt like it fit the overall vibe of the film, in all honesty, because it was just very primal sounding. And again, I think there is a lot of messaging about humans' primal instincts and needs whenever it comes to that. So I definitely found that very interesting. So I think it's good, just because it is just a lot of banging of instruments and everything. So I think, I mean, I don't know. That's what my humanity self is pulling out of this right here. One criticism I would have of the film is with how much time they spent with the film is very abruptly ended. Like, they were quick to be like, okay, we gotta wrap this up.
I will say, I was hoping all the boiling would boil up to something, and it does kind of just end a little bit.
Yeah, for sure. And I feel like it's the equivalent of anytime you had to give like a presentation at school, and you're taking your time, you're like on fire and everything, and then they show the cue card, you got like 30 seconds, and then you're like trying to speed through the bullet point there, because they would absolutely penalize you for going over. So that's how it kind of felt. So that was a little bit unfortunate, especially because, again, this film is like an hour and 45 minutes long. I felt like they could have trimmed off some of the stuff there and made it a much smoother end, or at least a more sound end. But as is, I still felt like the ending was fine. It just was like, I was just started laughing at the end of it, because it was just abrupt and my brain couldn't comprehend like what just happened and everything. But that's one of the other criticisms I would have without getting into spoilers there. Aaron, do you have any other thoughts, be it good or bad, about Onibaba?
I mean, I guess I'll just, on the story point, most stories, I feel like the story does not have a conclusion.
Yes.
It ends at the climax.
That is such a good observation, dude.
Yeah, like if you think about the story arc, it's supposed to build to the climax, and then there's that little part at the end that everybody forgets about, I guess, where the graph goes down for a bit. It dips back down into a lull of non-action. Which is the resolution, the ending, the conclusion. But yeah, we just kind of, like, although I do feel like most that the plot's resolved by the end, and there is a little bit of up in air action about what happened. That I think is intentional. At the same time, the pacing is really odd because it's not an arc. It's just kind of like a line up and then it ends.
Yeah, I definitely would agree with that. That is a really good observation, which is probably why I just was so like befuddled, because again, it is a very slow moving film. Like it again, it just takes its time, but then this is arguably like one of the most heightened moments in the entire film, and it just kind of goes like it's done.
Conclusion.
Yes, the end. Ran out of film or whatever.
Run the credits.
Yes. So, that. I mean, I can't say like, oh God, that was awful or anything. No, it's nothing like that, but it's just...
It was a choice. It's just, it kind of leaves the audience feeling a little unresolved, and I don't know if that was intentional or not, but it is a little like, just like, and it's over.
Yes, for sure. Because it's not even like what you see in a lot of horror films where like, we're safe now, and then, oh, psych, the killer's still alive, or whatever.
Right,
it's not even
like
that. I mean, Aaron's not joking whenever it says there does not feel like there's resolution. Technically, I guess there is.
Like, in spoilers, I can talk about like what I think the film wants you to take away from it, but there is definitely like, if this was a modern movie, it would have rolled for another 3 minutes or something.
Yes, for sure. At least have some sort of thing there. Man, aside from that, I don't know if there's anything else I could talk about without spoiling. It's definitely a little bit more tricky, especially since there's a lot of build up, and I feel like we already had to spoil kind of some early stuff in the film there.
I think you got to discuss this, because
okay. I guess without further ado, let's talk about our ratings for Onibaba then, Aaron. So please serve your rating.
I'm going to stick to the painting analogy, because not only do I think, watching this movie was like an art gallery, I feel like this whole movie is like a painting, in the sense that, in the story sense, when you there's no real end to looking at a painting. You know what I mean? It keeps going. A piece of art like that. And that's sort of the vibe I'm left with after watching this movie, is like I watched something that was undeniably art, undeniably interesting, but also like I'm not satisfied upon leaving the screen. It is difficult to rate because I don't think it follows a traditional narrative structure. Which is fine. I mean, this is like, it's a Criterion Collection film. I kind of thought we were in for something artsy-fartsy. It's definitely one of the better Criterion Collection films.
Yes, I would agree. There's definitely some stuff I watched that I'm like, what the hell is this?
I spent most of my time watching Criterion Collection films in college, and I was like, I gotta watch the good stuff.
Yeah.
And then I was just like, I don't think I have the tools to understand what I watched. But this one, I feel like I understood it. It's just, and I understand why it needs to be preserved, and it is cinema. It is absolutely cinema. It's just, it's one of those things that, like, is this a movie I want to pop on a Saturday night and eat some popcorn, invite my friends over? No fucking shot. No. There's so many. We didn't even talk about the boobies. This is just the boobies. I wouldn't watch this with my family. It's just boobies, the movie. It's not boobies in like an American horror movie sense where they're like, hey, boobies, come buy tickets. It's definitely in like a foreign film kind of sense where it's just like, we're starving and we're eating rats to survive, so our boobies are out. The whole movie.
Put that on a t-shirt.
This is how life is, okay? Nobody's jerking it to these boobies, okay? Anyway, this is supposed to be like the summary of my thoughts, but it's ending up being the rambling of them. I'll cut to the chase. This is like I think this is God, this is hard. This is like a 8 out of 10 movie for me.
Okay.
It is. It's not like on an enjoyment factor, I'd probably say it's like a 5 out of 10. But like when I'm looking at something that's like undeniably art, undeniably important in cinematic history, undeniably a vibe that's going to stick with me for a long time, I feel like Onibaba is all those things. So it just really suffers from the fact that it's an incredibly slow burn that, as we talk about in spoilers, I don't think really pays off. But ultimately, it's watching this movie for me was like looking at a good painting. It's going to stick with me. I get the feeling, but it's not something I want to spend 2 hours doing.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's definitely apt. I feel like definitely appropriate there. I'm kind of with you there. Again, I'm definitely happy I got around to watching this film, but I don't think it's going to be a film that I'm going to visit soon. Not because like other films sometimes where it's like, man, that was good, but I feel awful after watching it. It's just most so again like, do I really want to spend almost 2 hours again, watching something like this? Probably not. Am I happy I watched it? Absolutely. Definitely glad I got around to it. I see why it is respected as much as it is there for like one of the better like horror Japanese sort of style films there and everything. It's just again with how slow the pacing is. It's like I would just rather look at a still of this film as opposed to like sitting down and watching it entirely. Now, I don't know. Maybe in like years later I could probably watch it again and be like, yeah, it was all right there. But I'm also on the same thing because I respect it a lot as a film, but entertainment wise I would say it's a little bit lower there. So for that reason I'm gonna come in at a cool 7 out of 10. Like, I like it. It's just not one that again I can really recommend most audiences watch. Again, it's like if you're looking for a very atmospheric film and a gorgeous black and white film, yeah, absolutely. But if it comes to like, being like one of the best Japanese horror films I've ever seen, no, I probably wouldn't go that far, only especially because the horror aspect I feel like is very more minimal as opposed to, again, you made a great observation. That's more suspense than anything and just waiting for tensions to boil and build up and rise and everything. But yeah, I mean, I still like the film and everything. It's just kind of, again, art gallery. I think that's just definitely good.
Yeah, if you're wearing a monocle right now, pop this film in.
Yeah. Polish your monocle. You're going to want to see this.
Otherwise, if you're a Zoomer, if you're in the Generation Z, watch the Family Guy Funny Moments version of this film.
Yes, exactly.
The hyper clips.
Man, this is worse than that time I ran into Onibaba. Get your boob back in!
You tell me how to get the fuck out of this grass, huh? North? I don't know what north is. Can you help me get this mask off my face?
Okay. We gotta stop the Family Guy descent here. We're gonna spoil this film. Again, make your judgment on whether you want to watch this film or not, because we're gonna spoil it. So Aaron, please, as always, sever off your first spoiler you want to take for you.
Peter. Why'd they kill the dog, Peter?
Look, Brian looked really delicious. I don't know what the hell you want me to do. Peter, I'm still alive. You cut off my legs. Oh, shut up, dog.
You got the whole cast.
I
guess Seth MacFarlane does too. So you
yes, he does.
You guys are the same talent level.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, no, the dog part was pretty jarring. It's just like dog, and they just catch it and beat it and eat it.
That was so jarring because again, this is a very slow-paced film, but then randomly they'll just do something that's automatic and fast, which again, I'm sure it can be viewed as like artistic because, I feel like again, it's just survival mode. Like they see a dog, they're like, oh my god, that's a lot of meat.
Right.
Smash it with a rock.
Crazy.
And then they're just chowing down on dog carcass. So I was like, good lord.
I was thinking this movie might take like a cannibal turn or something.
I thought so too.
But didn't. There's a lot of things I thought might happen. I really expected this movie to be more supernatural than it was.
Yeah.
In the end, there was only one real supernatural element, and that's that the mask stuck on her face or whatever.
Yeah, but like the crazy thing about the mask is like, I feel like, and I'm sure it is one of those things like, oh, it's up to the audience to interpret whether it's supernatural or not. Because what I'm taking from it is maybe the mask is hard to take off because, for context of people that don't know, the older woman ends up being confronted by a samurai who demands that she takes him to Kyoto, and he's wearing this Oni mask, aka like demon mask, and she's like, why do you wear this mask? And he's like, because I am handsome and I can't have people seeing this or whatever. But as she tricks him to fall into this hole, that they do a good job of really making the hole a point in the film, and I do love that. But basically tricking him into falling and dying, she has a hard time taking off the mask, and then she finds out that there's like his skin is all messed up and everything. So I don't know if the mask ends up being hard to take off because like there's like leprosy or something like that where the flesh is melting off and
maybe
melding, like if it's disease ridden or if it is truly more so a curse. And again, I think that's what they were going for. It's kind of like, oh, it's the audience's interpretation, because at that point the younger woman starts hooking up with Hachi, because again, this was just sort of like primal instincts there. It's just like, I don't have a husband, it's hard to get all the needs that I want, just hanging out with my mother-in-law, I need some action.
Mother-in-law of my dead husband that's been gone for a long time.
Yes, exactly. And so whenever she starts sleeping around with Hachi, the older woman is like, no, I can't have this because they'll run off and then I'll be alone and I'll have nothing. So then she starts trying to invoke the fear of God in this younger woman by saying like, yeah, lust, they say, is like one of the worst sins. Like, you're going to go to hell and demons are going to come after you.
And she's like, I don't know. Well, yeah, but she wasn't saying it in like a point where like you are, because she didn't know, quote unquote, that this was happening. So she was like, oh, like a great priest told me once offhand that you're going to burn in one of the worst hells and be transformed into a dog. Which I thought was interesting because there's a lot of dog shit going on. Like, when Hachi comes in, all she's doing is calling him a dog, a lustful dog, lusting after, like, a bitch and heat, blah, 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 all this dog metaphor. And then, that's why I was like, oh, she's gonna kill Hachi or something, because then when they kill the dog, I was like, oh, this is symbolic, you know what I mean? Like, she's gonna kill him, because they've been calling him a dog this whole time. And then, of course, he even sneaks up to the tent and is, like, making barking noises, because he's a fucking weirdo. And she's like, is that a wild dog? I'll kill you and skin you or whatever. And so I was like, oh, this is going to happen. But that didn't happen.
No, it didn't. It's very, very odd with a lot of the stuff they build up, because I seriously thought, like, especially with the older woman, whenever she starts losing her mind that the younger woman and Hachi are hooking up and everything, she like looks through like the slits of the hut there, and I'm like, oh, maybe she's going to use that to the advantage and maybe take one of the weapons and like penetrate them while they're in the act and everything. Yeah. Damn it. I know, I was like, I'm not gonna say that, and then you just took it, and I'm like, that's fair. Because I thought something like that was going to happen or whatever, but it doesn't. It's very odd too, because you think this entire time with the tensions boiling, because she really is getting mad at Hachi, which is here's the dynamic that I love about it that I have to bring up though. It's not even completely like one-sided where it's like, you're disgusting and now you're taking my daughter-in-law or whatever, everything's, because there's a point like whenever she sees them like for the first time doing the act, she's not like immediately repulsed or tries to go in like you think she is. She's just immediately like turned on by the act and then has to like take herself away to a tree and everything, which is
weird.
It's weird.
With a tree with a big vagina-shaped crack in it that she, like, starts grabbing.
Yeah! So it was definitely, like, I mean, I guess that makes sense. It's, like, been a while since any action happened. But it definitely was not the turn I was expecting of, like, BRB. Right. Gonna go to my hump tree. My hump stump. Doing that. So I thought that was interesting. And then even later, she's like trying to hook up with Hachi. He's like, how about you hook up with me? He's like, you're old. She's like, I'm young on the inside. And I'm like, what the hell?
Yeah. I mean, I feel like a lot of the motivation for that was just because she was like, stop fucking my daughter-in-law, you can fuck me instead. And he was just like, I'm not taking that offer.
Hachi just like, nah, I got what I need.
I'm alright.
Yeah. But again, I think it does start to devolve in the fact that I think that they show that a lot of people end up having to revert to a more primitive state, primal,
Mm-hmm.
like, fight or flight sort of thing. Because literally, they end up killing, like, the samurai soldiers, and then
Mm-hmm.
they're, like, tactical. They're, like, ripping off all the armor and stuff. And
Mm-hmm.
then they drag the bodies to the pit there to
Mm-hmm.
throw it down the hole. And
I
so,
thought that's where the Oni shit was gonna come from, or where
me
like they were
too!
sacrificing to the pit or whatever. But
That's what I thought
it was
too.
just an effective way to dispose of bodies, I guess.
Yeah, it's weird. I thought the pit was like it's weird. I want to say like the pit was like symbolic, but
Mm-hmm.
I feel like they didn't really use it as much as they wanted to because I mean, I guess it's like you could look at it because whenever the older woman goes back for the body of the Oni samurai that was at
Mm-hmm.
the bottom of the pit, maybe that's like her descent into hell
Yeah, that's
and
what I was
giving
thinking. Some
in.
Joseph Campbell shit. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. And then suddenly, because again, she's like having like her own needs, because she's like, oh, well, if I can't have Hachi
Mm-hmm.
and I'm going to lose my daughter, I have to do something to stop this from
Mm-hmm.
happening. And so she does that because she ends up again, which I do love the fact that even back then or whatever, they're using the fear of God to stop people from having sex.
Right. Right.
Dude, that's like, between a married couple, that's fine. But between two people that are married, yeah, you're going to
You're
hell.
going to hell.
Yeah, dude.
You're gonna have
That
four
even though she was
legs.
literally just trying to hook up. And
Right.
then, she starts using the Oni mask to scare the younger woman, which is where I feel like the real horror starts to play in or whatever. Because
Mm-hmm.
that Oni mask, that's one hell of an Oni
It's
mask. I
spooky.
love that. Yeah.
Yeah.
And even seeing the samurai initially walk in whenever he stabs through the door, and I love him. He's like, "Don't worry, I'm not going to kill you." And I'm like, "What the hell was that then?"
Right. Right.
um, but ends up like standing in a field, and again, that's the still that I saw whenever I would like look up Onibaba,
Mm-hmm.
is the woman dressed up as the Oni, standing out there, arms spread across. And I genuinely thought it was going to be a thing that maybe she started doing it, but
Mm-hmm.
then Onis are actually coming out.
I
I
thought that too. Yeah, yeah. Like she was gonna, because it was always that cycle, right, where she ran out. She's like, I'm gonna go out to sell this stuff, and then the daughter would run to go see the boy, to go see Hachi, and then she'd be standing there as the Oni, and then they'd come back and she would return or whatever. I thought, yeah, one of those times she was gonna run back to the hut, and then yeah, the mother-in-law was already gonna be there, and you were gonna be like, wait, who was Oni? You know?
Yeah, like I genuinely thought it was going to be a lot more supernatural play into the aspect, especially like with
Mm-hmm.
that pit. I figured that would be like an opening to hell and like
Yeah.
the dead bodies they killed. They didn't really talk about murder being a sin either. They're just like, bro, we're just surviving.
Right.
And they literally kill a lot of like innocent people. I mean,
Yeah.
they were like fighting each other, but they're like running in last minute to KS.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. No, I love that because yeah, there's that scene, yeah, right after Hachi comes back where they're all standing out by the river and they see the two people, the warriors fighting, and they're fighting in the middle of the river. One of them kind of survives and is like injured and swimming over and is like, "Help me!" And they like help him up and then just beat him to
Yeah,
death.
they're drowning.
And he's like, "Go get the other one."
Yeah, and so like they didn't really talk about that aspect too much either there.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought it was just going to be something kind of like the sins of man coming back to haunt them or anything.
Right, yeah.
But
Because they talk about, yeah, especially in the beginning, they have that whole segment where she's talking about how the world's all upside down or whatever.
mhm.
He was like, yeah, there was a day where the sun went black and there was,
Oh my
people are
gosh.
eating lizards and things and like no farmers' crops are growing or whatever. It was all stuff that's like, yeah, you can explain that with like it was an eclipse and
Mhm.
they already talked about how they had bad hail that last summer, so nobody's crops was growing or whatever. But it's all still spooky omens or whatever. That it's like, oh, is the Oni going to arrive?
Yeah, so I was a little bit disappointed with that aspect. I was also kind of disappointed with the demise of Hachi. It was just kind
Mm-hmm.
of like a random thing. I mean, I guess it's like in line because I guess like it's the same woman he ran into at that trader's post or whatever, where they would trade the armor and swords. Because he runs into them once. It's like this older woman with like dark face paint or something,
Oh,
and the daughter. and then she pops up again in the hut and then just stabs him.
I didn't realize that's who that was.
That's what I'm guessing, anyways. Yeah. That's the only thing I could think of, because otherwise it's just even more random.
Yeah, because he was like drunk out in the rain looking for the daughter-in-law, and then he comes back, and yeah, somebody had broken into his tent and was just like eating his shit or whatever, and then stabs him.
Yeah, I just felt like, I don't know, I wish it would have been a little bit more powerful if the woman, the older woman, was the one that killed Hachi instead, especially because it's even, I don't know, you've got this permanently stuck to my skull slasher mode where a mass killer's going around killing, fornicating teens and whatnot.
Right, and she's got the motive and everything. She doesn't want him to take the daughter-in-law away.
Yeah, but instead it's random, and they never even see that Hachi's dead.
Right.
At that point, because basically, after like a couple of nights of tricking her or whatever, the younger woman returns back to see the older woman crouched with a mask on and saying, "Oh my God, you got to help me. This mask won't come off at all whatsoever." And they're trying to pull it off. And then she starts beating her face in with a hammer.
Yeah, because it won't come off of her face at all. And then, it starts beating it until it breaks. And she's able to, like, rip it off. But then her face looks just like the guy that she ripped it off of, that was apparently the most handsome man in the world or whatever.
Exactly.
Just, like, scarred.
And I'm guessing it's like at that point for the younger woman, it's like mass hysteria, I guess. Like the supernatural fears have gotten a hold of her and everything. And again, like, you're in this state of survival for such a long time in isolation and dealing with it that you're just going off and because basically she ends up like running away from the older woman, and the older woman's running away. She says, "Please don't leave me. Please don't do that." And, we're getting to like the pit that has been a focus of the film the entire time. Like, even to the point that Hachi would like literally screw around there and nothing came of it. It's just, I guess, to remind the audience, yep, there's still a pit here, just in case, because he would literally just scream down it, look down there. But towards the end of the film, you see both women are like running and everything, with the older woman chasing the younger woman. And, the younger woman jumps across the pit, and the older woman also jumps across the pit, but you don't see her land at all. And so you're like, I assume she probably made it, because she made it before, but the film just ends right there mid-jump.
Right. So the kind of cliffhanger is, does she fall and die, or does she make it? But
I feel like that's just kind of a weaker ending there. Because for me, at the very least, I'm like, I don't see why she would fail to jump at all there. And also just kind of what it leads to. So, like, all that stuff, Hachi's death, them chasing each other, that happens, like, I feel like in the last 5 minutes, maybe 10 minutes tops there. So it's just very odd.
It definitely ends like a play, like a tragedy, like a Shakespearean tragedy or whatever. Like, Hachi dies, the old woman's face gets disfigured, and all of her little tales that she spun of demons and Onis has come to backfire on her, because now her daughter-in-law thinks she's a demon even after the mask has come off.
Yeah, it's just really weird. And, whenever it comes to like talking about survival or whatever, they really didn't talk about it as much as I thought they would. They're pretty quiet. It's like literally where, like how thoughts like that would pop up with most folks at the beginning of the survival thing, but they've been at it for so long, they're just like, it's just another day.
Yeah, they're just like entrenched in this lifestyle now. That's just how they live.
But yeah, I don't know. And I wish I could say a lot more about the film, but it's just, again, a lot of like stock footage, as I would call it. And again, it's beautiful, like seeing the grass blow in the wind there, or landscapes or anything else like that. But there's just not too much to mention with that. I'm trying to think of anything else. I was, like I said, alleviated whenever they did have that Oni samurai kind of come up and talk, because he's just like, shrugging it off, and I think changes sort of like the chemistry of the conversations there. So it was cool. And again, also just seeing his appearance there, mysterious sort of thing like that appearing, I felt like that was good. It's just the fact that it came way late in the film that I'm like, okay, we're doing this now. I don't know, dude. I don't know what else to say about this film. Like, because everything else, there's not too much to say.
I guess I'm wondering what the film like is designed for us to take away from it.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess if I had to have an answer, I'd say that it sets up all this stuff that's supposed to be like supernatural, but in the end nothing supernatural really happens, but still these evils and acts of sin or whatever are happening in the world. And I think it's probably just to say that like mankind is actually the evil ones. I mean, they're the ones that have started the wars, the famines. They're the ones that are killing to just to survive and trusting nobody, and ultimately all that ends up being their downfall while they're in the midst of a downfall the entire film, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's like sort of stark and bleak like the whole film is, and like their whole situation is. And so I wonder if they kind of made it on purpose where you don't really get a resolution and you don't really get all the cool supernatural shit that you want or whatever, because at the end it's like, yes, life is hard and disappointing, and then you die pointlessly, like the old woman kills you in the tent even though we set all this shit up or whatever.
Jesus.
I like
that is very bleak now that you mentioned like that. Definitely would have preferred a little bit more mystical aspects, but it's not that kind of a movie. And like I said, I still think it's a solid movie even if it doesn't have it. It's just, I'd be curious to see what they would have done if they had played more into the supernatural stuff. Like again, I mean, that's why I love The Shining a lot as is, because it starts very mundane, but then the supernatural starts getting to a point where it's like, okay, is this stuff actually going on, or is it people's hysteria?
The magical realism. I feel like that's what really elevates art, is to be like, this could happen. It could. But then it's like, is this actually magical, or is it the realism? Like, what is it?
I just think they could have done a lot more, especially because they're in that huge feel. Paranoia should have set in, you know, especially like, you know, you hear like little sounds like twig snapping, anything like that.
And I love every time the daughter-in-law's running because she runs because she's scared of the grass at night or whatever. And they're playing all the like, what are those? The fucking bird noises that are chirping.
Oh,
in the background.
yes, like the bird call or whatever. That was great. That was like a great replacement for music instead there. Just sort of the rhythmic thing. And again, they do a very good job, both women do at the very end, just going hysterical there. So I think it's definitely good. And so the performances are not lacking at all. No, I don't feel like. I feel like all three of them do a good job to tell the story. It's just more so the fact that whenever it comes to the pacing and the content and the themes they wanted to explore, I felt like it was a little more muted. But yeah, it's still a very, very good film, and definitely one I recommend, especially if you love black and white films. I think it's definitely one of the strongest contenders in that category. Aside from that, Bubby, anything else you got to talk about with Onibaba?
I don't think so.
Oh. Okay, awesome. Well, we'll go ahead and jump over to the pit on that one there. We're going to just give teasers about the next film here. So this film takes place 20 years later in the magical year 1984.
Wow.
So it's an 80s film there.
Okay.
I'm going to be completely honest. This might be something that you... we're going to have to charades out here.
Okay, all right. I'm ready for it.
The opposite of day.
Night.
Okay, there we go. Easy peasy, lemon squeezy. And something happens this night that has to do with this space rock.
Like a full moon?
That shares a name with a reindeer. One of Santa's reindeer.
Comet?
Yep.
Night comet? Comet of the night? Night of the living comet.
you got really close. Yes, it's Night of the Comet.
Night of the Comet.
Yes. I was like, I got to rock with Night and then Comet, and I'm like, of the good luck.
We got it. We got that.
Yes, huzzah. Anyways, thank you all so much for listening to this episode, and we'll see y'all again next time when we're popping the scary with Night of the Comet.
Night of the Comet.
Night of the Comet.
Holy crap, is that the Night of the Comet?
Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube, Castbox, or iTunes platforms to stay up to date when new episodes drop. To see what Aaron and I are up to, check out our respective Twitter accounts. For me, it is @CoalkirkVA, And for Aaron, it is at Animal Game Dev. Thank you all so much for listening to our podcast. We'll speak to you all again next time when we're poppin' the scary.